distant land. Along the quay, storefronts come to life. Trucks, motorcycles, and carts stuffed with ripe fruit slowly fill the street. As the city wakes up to a blossoming sunrise. At the heart of the growing, pumping mass of motion comes a solitary giant on her daily commute. When you see her gray skin and her swaggering gait, you stand transfixed. Meeting her gaze, you can see a wild magic. A magic lost on our paved streets and vanished from our quiet rooms. And maybe you can see something else. Welcome to episode 13 of Not Now, Not Here. This week's episode is about that very same magic. The power to change the world around us. For better or for worse, this power can alter the very fabric of our lives. It's also the story of a girl who keeps a wish just below the surface of her skin. But what will she give up in the name of change? What would any of us give to change our lot and to tap in to that wild magic? So turn down the lights, close your windows and doors, and sit back. Prepare to enter a world that is not now, not here. Sambo. Mary wished she were a different girl. A girl who looked nothing like herself. A girl with skinny arms and athletic legs the other girls at school wouldn't make fun of. A girl with a small nose and colorful eyes that wouldn't make boys and teachers scowl and turn away. She'd felt that way since she was tall enough to see her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Since she was big enough to see what everyone else was laughing at. "You could always see a doctor," a girl told her one day at lunch. "A plastic surgeon could fix that face of yours." "I don't think they'd have enough plastic," said another. And then everybody laughed, and Mary had gone to sit by herself at her own table. She had been sitting there ever since. What Mary really needed, she thought, was a fairy godmother. The kind she'd read about in books. A beautiful old woman with wings and a shiny gold and purple dress. A woman who would take away Mary's double chin and bushy eyebrows with the wave of a wand. A kind godmother who could turn her into one of those beanpole girls who could squeeze into tight jeans and walk down the sidewalk in a clump, laughing together and drawing the gazes of the boys in town. But that was impossible. Mary knew it was. By the time she was 12, she didn't really believe there was anybody out there who could grant wishes. Not really. Until she heard about the elephant, Sambo. Sambo was magical. People all over town were saying it. Part of a traveling carnival that had just arrived in town. As soon as people had seen the animal, they had started spreading stories about her. They drifted from ear to ear like a worded virus. "That elephant can understand any spoken language," people said. And her whole family was murdered in front of her by the Khmer Rouge. And, of course, she grants wishes. Mary thought it was all just a bunch of talk. Until she'd met the strange boy who worked at the carnival. The boy with the scar. He stood behind the trailers, smoking. He was telling everybody that the stories were true. She was raised in Cambodia, the boy said. Her whole family was killed, but she survived by hiding in the deep jungle where people don't go. When the war ended, she walked out, and people came from all over the world to see her. They flew from the other side of the globe just to look into her eyes. When her owner died, we got her, and we started taking her around so everyone could see her. Does she really grant wishes? Mary asked. The boy smiled at her. Of course she does. She's got magic in her, and it's a wonderful kind of magic. The magic to change. You see, that kind of magic is inside everybody when he's born, but most people forget how to use it as they grow up. Well, elephants never forget. I saw one woman who was in a wheelchair stand up and walk after Sambo touched her with her trunk. I've seen fevers stopped in their tracks, strength returned to ravaged lungs, and crooked backs made straight. Every change under the sun by wise Sambo can be done. His words might have sounded hokey, but his face told Mary something different. Over the years, people had lied to Mary so much that she had a knack for telling what was true and what was not. It was something found in the corners of eyes, a secret given away by the wrinkles that formed when her parents said, "Those other girls are just jealous." This boy's eyes told her that he wasn't lying. It was the way his gaze didn't linger on her hairy upper lip or draw slowly across the fat under her arm. Through the cigarette smoke, his eyes fixed on her own, and there was honesty there. Sambo stood in a barred trailer at the heart of the carnival, behind a large, circular fence. Mary made her way through the maze of tents, of carnival games and rides, past the carnies and vendors and the smell of funnel cakes. Like a hurricane of color and life, the carnival swirled, and the elephant was the eye. Mary gawked at the way her big body swayed, at her tree-trunk legs and her probing nose. Her trainer fed her sugar cane, and Sambo munched it knowingly, watching the crowds through the iron bars. This, Mary knew, was no ordinary elephant. So, that evening, Mary decided to talk to Sambo. She would have to be alone, and that meant going at night. Going to the carnival during the day would be humiliating. She could just see the other girls pointing and laughing. Mary wants Sambo to make her pretty, and I can't tell which one is the real elephant. Besides, the elephant's handlers wouldn't let her anywhere near the cage during the day. At night, she could sneak in and stand as close as she wanted. At night, she and Sambo could be together. It was after midnight when she broke in. The brightly colored, flashing lights of the carnival rides were dimmed, and the usual callers at the game booths had been replaced by an eerie, ice-flat silence. The wind rustled through the darkened tassels and flags that hung from the tent poles, blowing empty bags and wrappers along the pavement. Mary walked slowly. Sambo was there, in her large cage trailer behind the circular iron fence. There was no way through. The gap between the iron bars was too narrow, so Mary had to climb over. She wrestled a metal garbage bin to the side of the fence to give herself a boost. Placing her hands on the top rail and putting her foot on a large warning sign that had been attached to the bars, Mary was able to hoist herself over, just barely. Giving no thought to how she would get back out, she toppled into the enclosure like an overfull grocery sack. Sambo was watching her from behind the bars of her trailer. Mary could see the moon glinting in the elephant's big, baseball-sized eyes. "Hello, Sambo," Mary said. She stood and straightened her sweater. The elephant gazed at her. Mary didn't know where to begin. "Everybody laughs at me," she said, taking a step closer. "I'm hideous, repulsive. I don't have any friends. Nobody will talk to me. Even my teachers can't stand to look at me. I don't know. It's been this way my whole life, and I can't take it anymore." As Mary walked to Sambo's cage, she told the elephant everything. All the jokes the students had said behind her back, all the whispers just loud enough to hear, all the times they'd tripped her or laughed when she'd fallen out of her chair, about the time the girls had thrown pudding at her, or when they had stuffed their shirts with books and papers and pretended to lumber down the halls just like she did. "I want to be different," Mary said, sobbing. "I don't want to look like this anymore. You can change me. You have to." She wrapped her hands around the thick iron bars of Sambo's cage. It was the closest Mary had ever been to an elephant, and she thought it was beautiful. Its skin was tough and leathery, covered with little hairs, strong, invulnerable, the kind of skin that no insult could penetrate. Her trunk dangled close to the ground, coiling and uncoiling like a massive snake. Sambo's legs were muscular and long, and her eyes were wide and shining through the darkness. Right then, Mary believed that Sambo was magic, or at least some kind of it, and she held her breath as Sambo opened her mouth and took a step closer. "Yes," Mary whispered. "I believe." As Sambo extended her trunk, Mary reached out her hand to make contact. But her fingers felt nothing. Instead, she felt the tough skin of Sambo's trunk wrap around her ankle. Then the elephant gave a sudden jerk, and Mary fell to the ground. Sambo lifted her the way a child would lift a rag doll. And Sambo pulled. Mary's left leg squeezed tightly through the gap between the bars, but there she stopped, wedged into the opening. Her wide hips would not go through. Sambo blared like 100 trumpets and pulled harder. Mary heard a crack and felt a sharp pain scream through her leg and up her back. When she cried out, Sambo jerked again, harder. Mary's hands frantically grasped the bars of the elephant's cage, but it did no good. Bit by bit, inch by inch, Mary was pulled through the narrow space between the thick iron bars. Nobody heard her screaming. But then, it's difficult to scream when your stomach is being squeezed through your teeth. The police arrived early the next morning.
I don't know why anyone would get so close,
the sheriff said.
Didn't they see the fence? Elephants are dangerous animals, especially this one. Came from Cambodia, for Pete's sake. They say her whole family was murdered in front of her, and now she spends her whole life in that tiny trailer? That's a nutcase, by elephant standards.
The deputy put his hands on the bars and looked through at the red mess inside Sambo's cage, at the pile of flesh and bone tossed into the corner, at the circular footprints stamped into the bloody hay. Whoever that is should have at least seen the warning signs, he said. It says keep out at least a dozen places on that fence. He sighed heavily. Do we know who it was?
Fat little Mary Wilcox,
the sheriff said. Oh, God, said the deputy, feeling a little sick. That looks nothing like her. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. We hope you found it as slimming to hear as we found it to make. This week's episode features music by Kevin MacLeod. The songs On the Shore, Come Play With Me, and Reign Supreme are used under the Creative Commons license. To view more information about the license, you can visit notnownothere.com, or you can visit Kevin's site at www.incompetech.com. If you want to hear the songs on this week's episode, go to our site for links to each of them. Other music in this episode is from jewelbeat.com. Both of these sites are great if you need music for any projects that you are working on. freesound.org also provided sounds of a less musical variety for the episode. Before we wrap up, I'd like to say something to you about elephants. Particularly one elephant, the great Sambo. The inspiration for this story comes from a real animal, one you can see for yourself if you ever have a chance to visit Cambodia. Her name is actually Sambo, and for more than 30 years you could find her giving rides to tourists and munching on bananas and sugarcane at Wat Phnom, a temple in the heart of Phnom Penh. I had a chance to meet and feed Sambo several years ago, and I can still feel the prickly hairs of her rough skin under my hand. While the story I wrote about Sambo does cast elephants in a somewhat homicidal light, I don't mean this as a referendum. In fact, the real Sambo is as gentle and polite as any creature I've had the privilege of meeting. Given the violent and bloody history of her country, some of which Sambo experienced firsthand, it is a testament to her and her species that she has become such a peaceful and friendly creature. The events in this story are a product of my own imaginings, with little basis in actual fact. Elephants are not killers. Elephants deserve our respect, but they do not deserve our fear. If you're going to pick something to take from this story, some kernel of terror you can carry along into that dark place where terror dwells inside you, make it a fear of cages and iron bars. These things are strictly human inventions. They are not the products of the lives we put in them. Sambo is more than 53 years old now, and has recently been retired from the tourism business due to issues resulting from a foot infection. After all, you try carrying people around on your back 7 days a week for 30 years and see what it does to your feet. She and her pachyderm brethren are truly wonderful creatures, and in need of our regard and care. So, if you ever have a chance to meet Sambo, or any other elephant in the flesh, consider giving it a bunch of bananas rather than it giving you a ride. This podcast is written and performed by Phillip Kohtz. If you like the stories you hear on Not Now, Not Here, please subscribe to us on iTunes or visit notnownothere.com to download all the previous and future episodes. Until next time, everyone, may the wind be ever at your back.